The Noble Natty movement. Noble Natty, the Noble Natty movement thing. It's some younger guys, younger than me, they're kids compared to me, all right? No disrespect intended, they are, they're kids. When I was that age, I might not have wanted to have been referred to as a kid, you know, but looking back from here today, oh yeah, absolutely, I was just a kid. There's that kid, had a lot to learn. Anyway, this Noble Natty thing with these young dudes, and it was like a snide thing. Somebody made a comment about them or one of them or whatever, and referred to them as the Noble Natties, right? So the moniker kind of stuck, and they just took it on because it was like, it was intended to be demeaning, you know. So they just owned it and made it their thing. So, you know, that's cool. I get that. I dig that. So the Noble Natty thing. The thing is, when I was a natty, we didn't call it that. We didn't have any name for it. We didn't have any distinction for it. We didn't have any internet. All this shit comes from in there, right? We didn't have any of that. And I saw some videos of some of these guys, and God forgive me for not knowing which one is who, and et cetera, but basement bodybuilding guy, I've seen a few of his videos. The other feller, he's from, is he French or French descent? I don't know where the fuck he lives, but he's over here, he's still over there, whatever the hell, but I've seen some of his videos, and one or two other people. But when I was, I've seen those guys. The one guy was mentioning, I think the basement guy, the basement bodybuilding dude, was talking about when he first started that there wasn't anywhere for him to get solid, reliable information, and there was a void. And kind of what they're doing now as a group, these group of guys, is they're like filling that void to provide for other people that are not on gear, that are natural bodybuilders, lifters, whatever have you, and just are trying to get the nuts and bolts, you know, truth of what works, what doesn't work, and the best approaches they might want to implement or try in their quest for hypertrophy or strength or whatever the fuck they're trying to accomplish. Now, when I started out, there wasn't anywhere to go. Wasn't anywhere to go. If you trained at home, which I certainly did, I was an introvert, I was an undersized guy. I'd already been fighting competitively for quite a few years because I was a bullied kid. I was a sickly kid, you know, scrawny kid, underweight kid, small for my age, a year, 2 years accelerated in school, so I'm always going to be the smallest dude in class, right, basically. And, you know, I was an actually skinny guy, skinny kid. And I got bullied, so early on, I've been through this before, I'm not going to get in depth with it, you know the story. Early on, I figured, well, I got two choices. I either got to learn to run and be hella fast, or I need to learn to fight, because I'm watching the Batman TV show, and I'm watching Kato and the Green Hornet, and I'm, you know, seeing these guys because they knew how to fight. Even Captain Kirk on fucking Star Trek, they knew how to fight, right? Even though it was all bullshit, you know, just saying as a child watching this shit. And so they could dispatch a whole room of baddies because they had something that I desperately was in need of, which was knowledge, which was training, which was a skill set, right? Enabling me to defend myself effectively. So it never occurred to me, well, I'm an undersized guy, I'm a small guy, I need to lift weights. Didn't equate that. Lift weights, get bigger, and that's going to make me badder. Didn't equate that. You know what I mean? The shortest point between, you know, the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. So if it's going to be physical and being physically bullied, then, and I feel I'm already at a physical disadvantage, I need to learn how to fight. It never occurred to me, I'm going to start working out, I need to lift weight. For one thing, this was like a very little known thing. It was like a very caught niche. You weren't just seeing dudes that lifted weights, you know, walking around not like today. I mean, you see guys, they're not all that successful. They may not look great, but the gyms are full of people, right? Not so back then. There are gyms everywhere now. Not so back then. There were not gyms everywhere like that. You know, at that age, I wouldn't have even known where to begin or where to even go, where there could be even a gym. I didn't even know where there were gyms that I could go and join a gym, and you know, so outside of my paradigm, so I had to learn how to fight. So, you know, fast forward years later, I don't have any of these problems with bullying anymore, but I still am self-conscious about my appearance. I don't want to take my shirt off at the beach, just like the cartoon ad you showed a guy getting sand kicked in his face and all that. Now, I could knock that motherfucker out because I was just a kid still. I'm fighting grown men and shit training, you know. They didn't have kids back then. None of this shit was commercialized. There were no children black belts. It wasn't, you couldn't even train like that today if you did. And there are still some of us out there that have schools today, and they're in agreement with me. They would be fucking lying if they disagreed. You could not train like that today. We're decades removed, generation removed from, at least one generation, maybe two, from that kind of training. It was like a cult thing almost. You couldn't train like that. You'd be shut down in a minute. You'd be sued left, right, and center, every other fucking thing. Anyway, so there weren't children. So I'm fighting grown adults. And at that time, I'm coming up and training with a lot of Vietnam vets because they come back, they're still fucking, you know, they need to let things out. They need to have an outlet, and a lot of them go to some kind of martial type of training. They go to boxing, they go to, you know, judo, they go to jiu-jitsu, they go to karate, you know, real karate, okay, real karate, which it's for 90% of you, it's not what you think it is. Anyway, so I didn't have that to worry about anymore, but I still was self-conscious about my appearance, you know, because to me, I had fucking abs. Nobody had abs at my age. I was self-conscious about that. It wasn't like little kids just had abs. At 13 years old, you had abs. 14 years old, you got abs. You know, 15 years old, you got abs. Back then, no. So I was self-conscious about that even. Because I literally had a guy one time say to me, "What the fuck is wrong with your stomach?" Literally, no bullshit. So it wasn't like a point of pride. It wasn't like I can't wait to get my shirt off because I got abs. No, you're the one who doesn't look the same as the rest of them. You know? That's not the one you want to be. So, and on top of that, I had ribs showing. So I had abs, but I had ribs. I don't want to take my shirt off. I got bones all protruding out of me and all at the beach. I felt very self-conscious, very self-aware. You know? So, I did start to work out finally. Started lifting weights. Now, am I going to go to a gym? I'm an introvert. You know, now there are a few gyms. Not many, or where I'm from, not many. Like Holiday Spa, like a chain of them, things like that, if you even know what the fuck that is. But I'm not going to go to a gym. I don't feel comfortable there. I don't even feel like, you know, I belong there. Like if I walked in one, people would be like, "What the fuck is this scrawny ass kid doing in here?" You know what I mean? That's how I felt. So I bought like a $50 set of weights with a bench. I had a cheap, shitty bench. It came with it. And I had this set of weights. They were Hoffman, right? Isn't that whose weights they were? The brand? Maybe, I don't know. Yeah, so I started doing all that Jefferson squat and, you know, all the traditional old school weight lifting, you know, weight lifter lifts. Because it came with a little pamphlet in it, and that's where I learned. You don't think I had to find my way? I had a lot of things going on. A lot of things I had to figure out. I didn't have anybody to demonstrate. It wasn't like I had a video or live in the flesh person to demonstrate these lifts. So I was sketches on a little teeny leaflet that came with the weight set. You know, 110-pound, 1-inch bar steel weight set. At first I didn't have a bench. It didn't come with a bench. First I was using a floor speaker, big Pioneer floor speaker from the 70s. You know, big, heavy, dense speaker. Would cost a lot of money now, I would imagine. Laid over on the side, and I'm benching on that. Because I wasn't benching very much, and I didn't weigh shit, so that was adequate for me for at least a fucking year. Then I finally broke down and graduated to buying a cheap-ass piece of shit bench that if I were to attempt to lay on one of them right now, I'd probably crush it. You know, all wobbly and rickety and little teeny tiny dowel. The steel bar would slide through when you elevated the backrest so you could have it inclined. But it worked, it did its thing. Did what I needed it to do. But as far as figuring out what to do, there were magazines. You know, there were some magazines that eventually I started to read some of these magazines. Muscle and Fitness, Flex. What else was there that was available, widely available? Muscle Mag International. One of my favorite ones because Muscle Mag International always had like a section in there where it had highly detailed sketches and drawings, because Robert Kennedy, who was a famous artist under a pseudonym, world renowned, believe it or not, was the editor. This was his brainchild, this magazine. And he did these highly detailed, drawings, displaying different exercises for different body parts on it every month. And I gained most of what I learned progressively from there. What lagged behind me, it wasn't the workouts that kept me from experiencing the best success I could have initially. It was my lack of information about nutrition, my lack of understanding about what an important component nutrition was in the formula, what an important piece that nutrition played. Because like I said, I was a skinny guy, little kid, I really didn't eat a lot. So even when I started getting, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, early 20s and shit, I'm still not eating much. So that's an ongoing process. I'm learning to eat more and more. Basic shit, gallon of milk a day stuff, right, that people would frown upon now. So, oh, that's not the best. Well, that's what we had. Protein powders at the time, if you became aware enough of them that you bought one, they were mostly mass gainers. They were garbage, and they really didn't want to mix. You definitely are not going to put them in something and stir it up. I had one of those antique hand blenders, like by hand, that you turn and cranked. The little wheel spun around. Stirring it up with that. You couldn't stir it up. And if you let it wait, if you took 2 minutes to drink it, it's all going to settle at the bottom again. If it settles at the bottom and you leave it and don't drink the whole thing, then when you go to wash it out, you literally had to take like a steak knife and try to chip that shit out of there. So I can imagine what it's doing laying in your stomach, right? Protein bars? No, there was one protein bar, the original Power Bar, and it was hard as a fucking brick. It's a good thing I was a young lad and my teeth were brand new. My adult teeth weren't that old yet. And some way I ate some of them, but they were horrible. It took you about 45 minutes to chew one of these fuckers up, even if you were hungry. And they were like very gritty and sandy. So, I saw where the guy at Basement Bodybuilding, that young guy was talking about that initially he went down the wrong track and had a hard time finding good, reliable, solid information, to accrue knowledge for training. I'm going to say that there's tons of knowledge out there, and when you started, when you were born, there was tons of knowledge out there. That's what I'm going to say. Yeah, if you were depending on the source, you were going to YouTube or whatever, you still, maybe it wasn't anybody at the time that you found that had reliable, good knowledge or addressed what you needed to address, but you guys have fucking fuckloads of information at your disposal. Now, here's one thing. I saw him talking about the pump also. Maybe it was him, maybe it wasn't him, maybe it was another guy. One of these Nobel NATTY guys talking about the pump. And that as a natural, you're not going to get a pump every time, and that's kind of like the icing on the cake, or it's the extra credit, he said. If you happen to get the pump, etc., etc. I don't know what the fuck you're talking about, bro, because as a natural, as a natty, I got pictures of me as a natty, they're not on a computer. I'd have to scan them in, they're actually pictured photographs. But, I made very good progress compared to where I started, and I got hellacious pumps. I felt like it anyway. I wasn't big, so even when I was pumped, I felt big. I was bigger, but I always got excellent pumps. If you're not getting a good pump, natty or not, that has nothing to do with it. If you understand the biochemistry of what's going on, the biology of what's actually happening, if you're not getting a pump, are you going to make progress? Yeah, you're going to make progress. But the primary thing the pump indicates, primary thing that it indicates that you need to be like, okay, well, check that off the list, that's good shit, is the presence of nitric oxide, right? You can take all the precursors and shit, and you can get that out of your nutrition and your food too. I wouldn't expect to get everything out of that. That might be why you're not getting a good pump, but you can't intake nitric oxide. So it's a gas. Well, when you create nitric oxide, if you get a pump, that indicates that your uptake of nitric oxide, the manufacture and uptake of the nitric oxide, the utilization of it is there. Everything's clicking like it's supposed to. So that's Is it necessary that you're not going to grow if you don't get the pump? I'm going to go ahead and say you probably still are getting some kind of pump, even when you don't realize it, but you're not really noticing it. I'm going to say that. I'm going to say you probably still, it's still there, because there's studies with Becker's muscular dystrophy. Again, we go back to the Cialis study, right? The tadalafil citrate, whatever. When they gave that to people with Becker's MD, they were able to get a pump, and that made the researchers, medical researchers, stand up and take notice and say, wow, that clarifies for us. We didn't think that they could produce nitric oxide. That's why we had a hard time, or it was impossible, to thwart or slow down the muscle wasting of this disease, muscle wasting effect of this disease. But when they would intake the tadalafil citrate, the Cialis, right, this brand name, trade name, they were able to get a pump. That's the first step, so that indicates the presence of nitric oxide. So it turned out that they had nitric oxide. They were manufacturing nitric oxide all along, even in the presence of this disease and condition, but something, the pathway, whatever, the actual uptake and utilization of nitric oxide, they had the ability to still manufacture it, but something was thwarting it, because taking in that Cialis didn't enable them to create nitric oxide. It just enabled them to actually utilize the nitric oxide, everything go where it belongs and work the way it's supposed to work. Now those are hardcore studies. You can look that shit up yourself. It's not hard. I'm not gonna put it all out there. Just Google fucking Cialis for Becker's MD patients. Just do that. Simple. So that tells you, if you're getting a pump, that just tells you that nitric oxide is present. If there's no nitric oxide present, there will be no muscle growth. That's a hard, fast rule. Again, refer to the study. Hard, fast rule. Does that mean you're going to get a tremendous pump every time, and if you don't, you're not growing? I don't know. I don't know. But I'm going to tell you this. Being a natty does not preclude you from being able to get a pump. Because when I was a natty and a young man, we would work out with our cement-filled fucking shit weights, you know, stuff like that, like friends would have, and they were the most common place you would run into, you know, somebody you trained with over their house doing a workout. They had cement-filled weights, whatever, usually. And we would work out, do the curls for the girls, literally, and then go out while we were still pumped. And that was as a natty. But I didn't know I had an option. It's not like today. So today, you know, when I was a natural, I didn't see anything noble in it, because I didn't know that there was an alternative that existed. I didn't know that, you know, coming into this, that, oh, I could take anabolic steroids. I could take testosterone. I didn't even understand anything about testosterone. Even my own testosterone. Never gave it any thought. Didn't need to. Outside of my paradigm. I just was lifting weights, then I learned to eat the food, you know, slow process. So maybe today, you know, I know that they accepted the moniker and took it on and began to refer to themselves as Noble Natties, kind of just as a way to you know, spit back at the derogatory intention that the first person to coin the phrase in reference to them had, which is cool. I think that there is something noble today, whereas that didn't exist. There wasn't anything noble about it in my day. You didn't, that's what you know, you lifted weights, big fucking deal. It was assumed that, you know, you didn't know there was an alternative. Oh, I didn't know I could just take anabolic steroids. It wasn't even unknown. It was an unknown. So, yeah, so I think it is noble today, because I have seen people and met people that before they even get in the gym and actually touch a weight in preparation to start working out, they want to know what steroids they should take. That's where we're at now. And that's why there's so much mess and confusion, and it's all such a fucking clusterfuck. You know, that kind of shit. And that's because of this, social media, so that information overload. That's what that's from. Didn't exist in my day. Information overload. Came with the internet. Now, did steroids exist? Yes. Yes. And if you stayed around long enough and you worked out long enough and you followed the trail of crumbs far enough, eventually you would wind up in a gym somewhere or another, and you would bump across or run across somebody that was on gear. You would find bodybuilders that were on steroids. Those crumbs would finally lead to that. Now that doesn't mean that you got to join them, but that's where you would get to. You know, that's how you would become exposed. So, my day, nothing noble about it. Today, and I know they meant it as a joke, but I believe it is kind of noble. I believe it is kind of noble. Just to disregard all the propaganda and all that fucking shit, and to make that election, which didn't exist for me initially, make that election to, you know, go the straight and narrow path and stay natural. And the whole point to that is that after 40 fucking years of lifting, after having been huge, freak, monster, biggest fucking guy, biggest guy in the gym I ever walked in, you know, when I was huge, after being that and being everything in between leading up to that, and now afterwards on the downhill end of it for the past couple decades, you know, I would say that one of the things I discovered is the same knowledge base, the same skill sets, and as far as training and nutrition, that knowledge that you developed to be a successful natural, that's the same fucking shit you need to know to be successful if a person decides to start to go down the dark side and get onto testosterone or any of these other things. Personally, I trained as a natural for, I don't even know how long. I would really have to sit and try and figure it out, but I trained as a natural probably a good solid 7 years, at least. And I'm counting 7 years from, you know, when I actually became serious or regimented about lifting, you know, and began my pursuit in that regard. Prior to that, of course, I fucked around here or there. You know, was at somebody's house that happened just to have weights, even though I didn't lift, and their brother had weights or whatever, and I might have picked something up and curled it, you know, or I might have done some shit on a chair with tricep dips or some shit like that every so often, right? But I would say a solid 7 years easily. And so when I started to use test, it was because it just seemed like that I needed to compete, because everybody was pushing me toward that. Because I'd made a lot of progress as a natty. I was a big guy as a natural, and I started as a small motherfucker. Now, I wasn't nowhere near as big as I got later. Nowhere near. But for me, you got to understand, when I started, because there's no internet, there's no social media, there's no none of this, there's no gyms on every corner. When I started, I had no expectations. I just said, let me try this out. And I tried it out, and I actually just liked lifting. So I thought, well, let me try this out and see where it goes. Let me see if I can put some muscle on my skinny self. I didn't expect slabs and slabs of muscle. I didn't expect to look like a pro bodybuilder. I didn't even know what that looked like yet. I just wanted to see if maybe I could do it. You know, and then it just extrapolated from there. Anyway, heard my phone ringing. Who the fuck's calling me this time of day? But so that's it. That's all. I just want to throw that out there. Pump is important. Pump matters, because if nothing else, it does tell you something that's pretty important for you to know, and it's probably happening anyway, whether you acknowledge it or know it or not. And as a natural, you can still get great pumps. There's no fucking doubt about it. I don't even get it. You're not getting a pump. I don't know what you're doing, but, you know, I'm not saying it's mandatory. You know, oh, if you don't get a great pump, you're not getting a good workout. I'm not saying that. But I fucking remember, just like yesterday, when I was a kid training, I remember getting those pumps. I will say this, I think I did build a little bit of muscle before I really started getting pumps. I don't know that I registered that I had pumps, you know, just from day one. I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that at all. At all. Anyway, that's it. Just my 2 cents, or 3 cents, kind of long-winded. I'll throw it out there. So yeah, maybe. I think in the face of everything you're inundated with today as a young person, you know, I think there is something noble about being natty today.